Hello and welcome to the Little Knowledge Podcast with me, Paul Busby, and as ever, with Goff Morgan. Now, Goff, hello.
Hello. Oh, yeah, just ride over me, I would. Yeah. Greetings. How are we all doing?
I wouldn't dream of riding over to you. If someone has stumbled across us, Goff,
yes.
What do we do here? Please tell me.
Yeah, well, it's a question we frequently ask. No, what it is, we have conversations about history topics in South Wales area, because we are. Paul is an historian. I'm a history enthusiast, and we have various connections with stately homes and Treeger House particularly, and we always just talk about this sort of thing in the pub. So we decided that we talk about it on YouTube instead, and hopefully tell people who are interesting little things about local history topics, which they may not have picked up on. And you can always join in the conversation with us in our comments boxes at the end and get in touch with us. And we're very interested to hear what you say. And we hope that you just enjoy earwigging two blokes chewing the fat on history. That's what we're doing.
There will be pretty pictures as well.
As if we are not gorgeous enough, Busby.
Well, speak for yourself on that one, Goff. Today, by the way, we're talking about Hensol Castle. What do you know about Hensol Castle, Goff, off the top of your head?
Absolutely nothing.
Well, that's good.
At all. Really, it's completely new to me. This one, I sort of know the name, but that's about it.
All right. Well, I thought we'd do something a little bit different today than for our regulars than we usually do. We're going to do our usual map, but then we're going to look at the building as it looks right now, right today. We're going to have a little nose around the building.
Yeah.
And then I'll explain how it got to this point. Okay. So a little bit different. So we'll start off with our, thank goodness for the National Library of Scotland, our old map here. So essentially what this does is it describes the scene as it looked at the turn of the 20th century, so about 1900. And Hensol is near Pontyclean, and this is Llantrisant Way, Pontyclean and Pendoilen, that beautiful village of Pendoilen. So here we are. We can see Hensol Castle quite clearly here. Looks rather large. It's got two courtyards. Having a little look around, they've got a lake and a little dot on it, and that little dot is for their little tiny folly, which appeared in the 19th century on a little island. They've got a tiny, almost Wendy house of a folly on the lake there. Now, if we come into the present day, you will see changes. Not so much for the castle, although there's another thing added here.
Yeah.
But you've got houses here.
Oh, yes.
New houses named after, or new houses and accommodation named after previous owners of Hensol Castle. Got a few more here. You find rugby pitches. You find football pitches, because it's where the Welsh national rugby teams and football teams train, and Cardiff City as well, because it's quite a complex now. It's the Vale Resort. And so you've got the Star Hotel.
I've heard of that many times and never realised it was associated with a castle.
Well, it was adjoining the castle.
Yeah.
Many years adjoining the castle. And then in 2003, 2004, Gerald Leek, head of Leekes, of course, he bought the castle.
Oh, right.
So he bought Hensol Castle and he turned it into a sort of a wedding venue, a conference centre. And so that's what it is now.
Yeah.
And the restoration job was particularly impressive, I think. And I'll tell you how it all got to this point. Hensol itself isn't particularly old as far as some of the topics we've talked about in the past. Hensol might mean old foundations. But the estate itself isn't particularly old. When there was a map of Glamorgan done in 1578 by Saxton, Hensol doesn't appear on it at all.
Oh, gosh. Interesting.
Well, look, there's a reference to it in 1419, but it can't have been a particularly large place at that time. So it's one of these latter estates, really, the 17th and the 18th century. But before we go into all that history, Why don't we go and have a little look at the castle itself? Here we are.
Oh, right.
The big old Gothic building is, or neo-Gothic to be more precise.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
We've got these two little things here, which they've kept little gateposts, tiny gateposts of the wall that used to run along where the ha-ha now is.
Yeah.
So they got rid of all that, but they kept the little tiny gateposts. So let's have a little look inside the castle. This is the south front, and this was, frustratingly, the first to be built and also the last to be developed.
Oh, right.
So it's the first part of it and the last bit of it to be redeveloped. So you can see these very romantic turrets, which are purely ornamental.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were added in the 1840s.
Oh, right. I was going to say they looked, they didn't look, they look very romanticized. That's the best way to describe it. You can tell it's a romantic castle folly type thing, and it's not.
It's always been it's not a castle, really, is it?
Oh,
it's a mansion dressing up.
Dressing up as a castle, yeah.
Let's have a little look. Fortunately, because it's a wedding venue, we can have a little look at some of the staterooms inside. Here we go. Sorry for the blurriness.
Yeah.
We're in the porch.
Oh, right. Oh, that's interesting. I never knew you could do this.
You can't with all properties, but you can with this one. And there's a little little gargoyle here.
Oh, yeah.
This is a 19th century porch, so this has been added a lot later.
Yeah.
So whether those faces are based on anything in particular, I'm not sure. There aren't that many in-depth studies of Hensol Castle. Yeah. So the research in this has been interesting. Taken a little while. Let's go in. So then you find yourself in a little porch area. Yeah. And then you go into the entrance hall.
Oh, blimey.
All very grand. Now, looking at the entrance hall with the paneling, you would think, 17th century, maybe. But I think this has been made to look 17th century.
Yeah.
One of the final architects to work on it was a chap called Wyatt.
Yeah.
Now, if that rings a bell, Wyatt's appeared on our podcast before because he's the architect of Malpas Court.
Oh, right.
And he worked on the Hendra, the Rolls property, and St. Paul's Church in Newport.
Yeah. And of course, Malpas Court is another sort of faux castle as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the difference being Malpas Court started from scratch, whereas Wyatt here was working on something that was already there. Yeah. This whole thing has been altered from a 17th century house, but how much of the 17th century house remains? The fabric of the building is extremely difficult to work out, in all honesty.
Yeah. I mean, that ceiling looks mid-Victorian to me.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Wyatt's had a go at this, hasn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely not earlier.
Wyatt and a chap called Brandon were the last two architects to really have a go at this. And looking at the fireplace, we have got a stag's head.
Hang on, we haven't resolved it. There we are.
There we are. A stag's head.
Interesting.
Nothing to do with the Morgans.
I was going to say.
The dog at the top with the stag's head means this is Fothergill, which dates this to the 1840s when Rowland Fothergill lived here and when he employed Wyatt and Brandon. So your hunches are pretty much spot on so far, Goth. We'll have a little look in the drawing room. Again, apologies for how long it takes to sort of sort itself out. Spin around, so you have a little look at the drawing room.
Well, that's a terribly comfy looking chair, isn't it?
You could sink yourself in there, couldn't you?
Yeah, I could settle in that comfy the chaise lounge thingy.
It's been restored really nicely, I think. And what we're going to do is we're going to head right down into the morning room, and we're going to head then into the oak room, which they use for weddings. And then we're going to take a little trip to the right because I want to show you a couple of intriguing things. So back through, I hope this doesn't give anyone vertigo or something. Let's get right through. So here we are. This is the morning room.
Yeah.
All very bright, isn't it?
Yes.
All very bright and nice. Again, a ceiling that's had some 19th century work done to it.
Yeah.
Flowers are out, so they're probably set up for a wedding. Then we find ourselves in the oak room.
Right. Which where you get married.
Where you get married, yeah. You can also sleep in the bedrooms upstairs. And all that accommodation on site, because of course it's a hotel next door owned by the same people. So, you're always going to find a bed for the night here, aren't you?
Yeah.
Now, more interestingly, in my opinion, when you start going through little doors and finding yourself in corridors, because if we go through here, near the toilets,
Yes.
I don't know why he's here. It's a bit generic having Shakespeare, but here is Wyatt.
Oh.
So I loved it. We did show that painting once, him looking really stressed, and we put it down to him working for Prothero, if you remember rightly. He doesn't look too great. So there he is, T.H. Wyatt. So what they've done in this little area here is they've put owners of the castle.
All right.
Near the lift. If I spin around, there's a chap who will be named fairly soon.
Yeah.
That's the last one to live here. This was Sir Francis Caradoc Rose Price, and he's sold up in the 1920s.
Yeah.
We have got Lord Talbot, who did an awful lot for the house, and he didn't live here. That's his dad, who was the Bishop of Salisbury and the Bishop of Durham.
All right.
So I love the fact that they have, apart from Shakespeare, I'm not sure what they're thinking there, but I love the fact that they've put people related to the house in a similar way that Llanrumney Hall have done, of course, Goth.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, if we go past the lift, something you don't usually say in a grade 1 listed building, they've done a great job. If we go past the lift, we carry on here. We head towards the main staircase, which is also pretty splendid. It's nice, isn't it?
Yes, look at that. Oh, that's amazing. That stained glass windows are lovely, aren't they?
Yeah, they've done a great job restoring that. And getting away from the Victorian dullness to return to the colour that would have been there originally.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we come to the bit which is I think is the most intriguing part. The most intriguing part. Because I can't work it out architecturally. So we got a bar. This is known as the Inner Hall.
Inner Hall.
Look at that.
Oh, gosh.
I can't work it out, really. I mean, I don't know. We look around.
I mean, it doesn't seem to have any identifiable function. What has it been? No.
Well, we got the staircase running along the top.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a lobby area, but this is intriguing, isn't it? And it goes out into the courtyard. If we turn to look what's through here, that's the bar area.
Yeah.
But this is odd, architecturally curious. So I'd love to know more about the Inner Hall. I suspect parts of this might be older than some of the bits we've seen.
Oh, right. So it's an odd little sort of hangover in the building as opposed to...
I think so.
But absorbed into it.
They've got an eastern staircase as well.
Yeah.
All very pleasant. And we head outside into the glazed corridor. Glazed corridor. If I get us out there. Here we go. Now, this is brilliant. This is where day becomes night by magic, right?
Yeah.
Nighttime.
Oh.
But this does give us a nice look at one of the first of two courtyards that this castle has. So we've got this here, and clearly a modern hall here created for functions.
Yes. So that would have been a central courtyard. None of that function room would have been there at all. Obviously.
Absolutely right. So this has all been added later. Central courtyard. Do you know what? I've given a talk here in this room, and I can't for the life of me remember who that was for. I remember the bar in the corner.
Yeah.
And my dad's convinced he's taken me to Hensol Castle, but I've given so many talks, they blend into one. I can't remember being here. But yeah, I'm sure I have. So this is used for the various functions. So if we go out of the house now, I can find my way out. If we ever go here, we'll know the way now, Goth.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure if you go here, go to the left, we should find ourselves opposite the front door.
Oh, yeah.
Right, let's get out. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. Because I wanted to show you the castle from the side. And this is where you see the real 18th century bits. So what happens was one of the earlier Talbots built the south bit. Then another Talbot built the east and west wings. And it's when you get to the east and west wings that you get to the bit which isn't really tampered with.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's pure 18th century, this.
Yes.
So you do have turrets which do have bedrooms and things like that.
Yeah.
These are the ornamental ones added later.
Right. Yeah. So that little, I presume we're heading down to a sort of stable gatehouse there, I presume, are we?
Absolutely right.
Area?
Yeah. This bit here was the servants' courtyard, the second courtyard, with the stables and servants' areas and a clock added. And the reason I'm showing you this is it doesn't look like this today. There's been a lot of work done at Hensol Castle. And if I stop the share a second, I'll show you what it looks like today and why. It looks a bit different, doesn't it?
Yes. Don't like that. Got to be said.
Well, don't be too harsh, because what we have here is it started in 2019. We have a distillery where in the presumably 17th century cellars, they actually distill their own gin.
Oh, well, that's very nice, but I don't like the way.
You don't like the canopy.
That canopy and stairs thing has ruined that entrance completely. It's destroyed the function. It was originally a courtyard entrance. I think that's appalling.
Well, what you will see with Hensol is that.
Appalled.
Oh dear! Well, don't be too appalled.
I think that's really bad. Don't like that at all.
Don't be too appalled. I mean, it's a reimagining. They were not going to have, horses back in the stables.
It's a plastic bloody canopy over the front, and they've removed the gate and put steps up, and tried to make it accessible at the sides. No, that's appalling.
Okay.
It's shockingly bad.
The man has spoken. That's perfectly fair enough. They do all kinds of distillery tours and all sorts there now, which I think is going pretty well. And a bit of a spoiler as to who owned this place, although not very long, if truth be told. We can see one of the drinks that they actually produce there at the Hensol Castle Distillery these days.
Hey!
Hall.
Benjamin Hall. Oh, blackberry gin. Oh, that sounds very nice, I must say.
Blackberry gin. And also...
Get my mouth shut. Should have been more flattering. We might have got a freebie.
Yeah, you've ruined it for us there. We've got crochet.
Not sure
vodka, gin,
crochet, but I got his hands on.
Rosé. Well, there are a few crochets.
Well, they weren't all evil.
Gin. I don't like that idea. I'm not a violet person, really.
Sweet violet gin. Oh, it might be nice. Might be drinking like Parma violets with a kick.
See, I hate Parma violets.
Oh, well, no, it's not for you then.
If I have a Parma violet, my tongue reminds me about it for hours afterwards. So we've seen what Hensol is now. But where does it really come into focus? It comes into focus in the 17th century when it was the home of the Jenkins family.
Oh.
The Jenkins family. And this is the most notable of the Jenkinses. And there he is. This is David Jenkins. He was, a fanatical royalist. And this is the 1630s and 1640s. He was a judge on the Western Circuit. And if you went against King Charles I, he would come down very hard on you indeed. Would Judge Jenkins.
I love the first line of this poem. Here Jenkins stands, who thundering from ye tower shook the bold Senate's legislative power. He looks like a man that can thunder from a tower, doesn't he? That's a stern face.
And he was sent there because, as you can imagine, he was on the wrong side for winning the Civil War. He was known as Heart of Oak and Pillar of the Law. But, of course, when things started going horribly wrong, it wasn't a good idea to be Judge Jenkins, really, after he'd sent various rebels to their death. It was on the other foot when he was captured in Hereford in 1645. He was sent to the Tower of London, then to Newgate Prison, then to Wallingford Castle, then to Windsor Castle. And in 1648, he was brought before the House of Commons, and he refused to kneel at the bar, saying that I would rather die with the Bible under one arm and Magna Carta under the other. So they fined him £1,000 and threw him back into prison.
Yeah.
When he was in prison, he started somehow producing these pamphlets attacking the Protectorate and Cromwell. And he clearly had connections because they were smuggled out.
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
So not sure how he managed it, but he did. And how he managed to stay alive is also a mystery. He appears to have been sentenced to death, but he survived. Now, possibly it was because a friend of his was someone who we have mentioned on this podcast, and that was Colonel Philip Jones of Fonmont Castle.
Oh, yeah.
Colonel Philip Jones, if you'll remember, Goff, ran Cromwell's funeral and was the right-hand man of Oliver Cromwell, and he ran South Wales, really. Yeah. Colonel Philip Jones during the Protectorate, and I think Colonel Philip Jones basically protected him.
Oh, right.
A move, by the way, which helped Colonel Jones in the future, because when Charles II came in, Colonel Jones wasn't executed. Yeah. So, maybe by helping Judge Jenkins, he helped himself, perhaps.
Yeah.
The Jenkins line sort of dies out in 1721. They had annual assemblies of bards at Hensol at this time. It was a great place for Welsh culture under the Jenkinses, but it sort of ran out in the male line in 1721 when Cecil Jenkins married Charles Talbot, and hence the Talbots took over.
Yeah. So I'm presuming these are the Talbots of Port Talbot fame, are they? Are they the same family or a cadet branch?
Yeah, there's a link between them and the Margam, the Margam branch. There is, these ones, however, these were legal. Never get into a legal battle with anyone involved in Hensol Castle. So if you're sued over your slanderous remarks over that, quite frankly, splendid distillery, you will lose, Goff, because you never take on Hensol legally, because Charles Talbot in the 1730s, when he inherited this place, was made first Baron Talbot and the Lord High Chancellor of Great Britain. So he is the premier legal mind for the kingdom, and here he is looking suitably legal.
What's he resting his hand on?
Yeah, it's showing a coat of arms and the arms of Britain or of England as well. So he's wearing his justice robes. He's got his hand on the crest, really. But he has blotted his copybook for all time because he was involved in the York Talbot slavery opinion of 1729 when Lord Talbot opined that slavery was indeed legal. Oh. So that's a slight blot to the escutcheon of the first Lord Talbot. Yeah. And there were many blots to come in the Talbot family. We have a huge scandal to unravel in a minute. But this Lord Talbot does continue. He probably built the east and west wing, possibly, or his son did. It's hard to tell exactly which. But there he is at All Souls. He still has a bust at All Souls College. But his son is extremely amusing. William Talbot, the second Baron Talbot, and Earl Talbot. Oh, dear me. It all starts with a scandal. So before we talk about William Talbot, we'll have a little bit of a scandal. And it starts with the third Duke of Beaufort. Here he is. This is Henry, 3rd Duke of Beaufort. Henry, 3rd Duke of Beaufort was a weak man in many ways. Physically, he was always ill, always going to Bath to take the waters. But he married brilliantly. He married a girl called Frances Scudamore of Home Lacey. And they're the Kent Church people.
I can't say we've heard the Scudamores, yeah.
Ancient family. Scudamores have invited us to Kent Church, Goff. So for God's sake, don't slag them off for the rest of this podcast. You've already lost us a lifetime supply of gin. Calm down, man.
I may say it is no reflection upon the quality of their product. Do not like their front door.
And if I secretly agree with you, I'm saying nothing. So here he is, the 3rd Duke of Beaufort. So he marries Frances Scudamore, who brings an enormous inheritance. So much so that he changes his name to get the inheritance. So the ancient Somerset family name, the storied Somerset family name, for a while becomes Scudamore Somerset.
Oh, right.
The
Interesting.
Duke of Beaufort became Scudamore Somerset to get his hands on this enormous wealth. So wealthy that if they have a son, in Game of Thrones style, he has decided that he will have so much land between the Scudamores and the Beauforts that he will be the King of the West.
Oh, my God.
One slight problem with this plan, and that's the generation of actually producing the son.
Yeah.
Because even though Henry here and Francis Scudamore were close for a while, they soon drifted apart.
Oh.
There was a certain fragility on the part of the third Duke of Beaufort. So Francis had her eyes elsewhere.
Oh, I see.
She had her eye on the second Lord Talbot, William of Hensol Castle.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. And William, quite frankly, had his eye on basically anything he could get. He was not a terribly pleasant man. He was not really chivalric, this man. He had no real sense of honor. For instance, it was estimated that, as far as we know, he had 16 illegitimate children.
Oh.
2 from 2 housemaids of Hensol Castle.
Oh, great.
In fact,
good prime minister material.
Well, I don't want to say anything about Pontyclean or Pendoilan, but if we went there today, a little bit like that Only Fools and Horses episode where they go to France and find everyone in the village looks like Uncle Albert, I suspect there'll be an awful lot of people of Pontyclean and Pendoilan that look suspiciously like the second Lord Talbot. So he starts this affair with the Duchess of Beaufort. And I mean, it's terrible, really. I mean, the information we've got on this is extraordinary. So I will clean it all up. The servant stumbled upon them. One servant, a footman, opened the door and found, as they put it, Frances in the lap of Lord Talbot.
Oh.
Jumped up very quickly. Her handkerchief was dishevelled.
Okay.
And Lord Talbot crossed his legs and turned away from me, said the servant. Thus arousing suspicions. So the servant started spying on them, because this is a nice little urner.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, they'd try and move elsewhere. They'd go in their chaise and they'd disappear into bushes. There was no real self-respect. You could stumble on the Duchess of Beaufort and Earl Talbot in the bushes. And this has to be kept secret. This is the problem. It has to be kept secret. Finally, the groom, a guy called John Pember, says to Francis Beaufort, "The servants are talking, Your Grace. They're talking." So she gives him 10 guineas to close his mouth. And then William Talbot turns up and gives him an extra 5.5 guineas to close his mouth. At this point, he'd been paid 2 years' income in 2 days.
I was going to say. Good little earner.
As he started saying things like, "Oh, I don't fancy work today," and I've got some information on the Duchess of Beaufort, she gives him a new job as her groom. She gives him horses, which he sells for £40 and doubles his wages.
Oh, dear me.
At this point, the other servants start taking memoranda. They all get in on the act. They're trying to be discreet, but every servant appears to be spying on them.
Oh, God.
Some of which may well have been in the pay and agents of the Duke of Beaufort himself, who has been told now that something's going on and wants to find out information so A, he can divorce his wife, and B, he can sue Lord Talbot and ruin their reputation in society. The Duke of Beaufort's spies are out there. And at this point, and the Duke and the Duchess separate unofficially. And at this point, the worst possible thing for the secret happens. Frances falls pregnant.
Oh, but it wasn't for lack of trying, was it? I mean, let's be fair.
It wasn't for lack of trying. She falls pregnant. So there's a lot of this going on, obviously, as the servants are looking through keyholes. taking a bob or two from this aristocratic love affair. So what they decide to do is, Francis has a different idea than William Talbot. Francis wants to keep the baby secret, hope it's a boy, hope her husband, who's very weak, falls off the twig, and she can say, look, here is the heir, the new Duke, and she's in the money. William Talbot doesn't like the idea of this. He just wants to keep his own wife doesn't know about any of this at this point. So what they do is they take her to Chipping Warden in Northamptonshire, to a private house that used to belong to Lord North. They rent out a house and they decide she's going to have the baby there, but it has to be kept secret. No one must know, even the midwife. So when she goes into labor,
a baby's been born, surely.
Well, this is the problem. When she goes into labor, they send off a servant to get the midwife from Banbury, and they order the midwife, Mrs. Styles, to come by a circuitous route so she doesn't know which house she's turning up at.
Oh, God.
It's almost like blindfolding the midwife, bundling her into the house. But there's two slight problems which drove Talbot up the wall about this secret birth. One, as Mrs. Styles enters the house, she sees all the luggage in the hall, and all the luggage is labelled the Duchess of Beaufort. Throughout the labour...
They're not good at this, are they? Let's be fair, they're not good at it.
They're not good. Throughout labour, the Duchess's lady's maid is not helping. As she is trying to urge her mistress on, she keeps referring to her as Your Grace. In the end, they have to pay everyone off. Mrs. Styles was paid 20 guineas. 20 guineas. And when the bill came in for the renting of the house and everything, it came to £170 to keep this secret. They're still paying blackmail money to all of these other servants, who are also in the pay of the Duke of Beaufort. But the servants are quids in. It's fantastic. But what happens is, the baby is a girl, so Talbot doesn't have to worry about it becoming the Duke of Beaufort. And sadly, the baby girl disappears from history. So possibly infant mortality, perhaps.
Oh, dear.
But all of this gets back to the Duke of Beaufort. Of course it does. And he is furious. He thinks he's got everything he needs to sue for divorce. And in those days, you needed an act of parliament if you were a peer of the realm to get divorced. So it's a huge scandal. So in 1743, he lodges divorce proceedings against Francis, intending on ruining William Talbot at the same time. What he didn't realize was that Francis fired back. And Francis said, well, the reason all this happened was because my husband is impotent. Impotent, she cried.
Oh, God. Oh, God, it just gets worse.
Oh, it gets much worse.
Oh, no.
Because the Duke of Beaufort said he wasn't, and therefore, legally, had to prove it. This is the first time since the 1400s that this sort of case involving a peer happened. Now, he could go to a brothel where people would watch him. But he decided, and I do apologize, I am cleaning this up.
You're cleaning it up?
Yes. In 1743, he elects to go behind a screen. And when the time is right, he knocked the screen.
Yeah.
And then people would come around to witness him, so to speak.
Yeah.
And this may...
Physicians.
And anyway, he did manage to do his duty behind the screen. To cheers, apparently. Cheers erupted. But whatever shred of dignity the third Duke of Beaufort had just dissipated entirely. But he won it. He got his divorce, but at what cost the next year in 1744? And he tried to sue Lord Talbot, but we don't know if he succeeded. We don't think he did, otherwise that would have remained. Amazingly, neither the Duke of Beaufort or indeed Francis reached 40. So they both died young.
Yeah.
Lord Talbot, the devil looks after his own, continued quite happily through life, apart from the fact when his wife found out about all of this.
Oh.
His wife cut him off completely, and you can hardly blame her, can you?
No.
She was Mary de Cardinal, who came to the marriage with £70,000.
Oh, blimey. That's a nice little earner for someone.
So Mary had a separation and ordered him to pay her £3,000 a year for the rest of her life. We think this is what Talbot looked in later years, but I'm a little uncertain about this particular portrait. I've only found one source for it, so this might be what Lord Talbot William looked like in later life. William made a wonderful fool of himself, by the way, at the coronation of George III. He was Lord Steward for the coronation and was in charge of the king's household for a while. And what he decided to do, he's quite an athletic man as a young man, as you can imagine, with the 16 illegitimate children and everything else. So he thought at the coronation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to train my horse to back out of the abbey.
Yeah.
And so I will not be turning my back on my sovereign. The horse had other ideas and showed its backside to George III.
Yeah, I've come across that story before, yeah. And it just kept reversing. And it virtually got onto the dais with the king.
Well, that's William Talbot of Hensol, yeah.
Didn't know which direction it had to go.
Well, for all these children that he had, illegitimate, he only had eventually a legitimate daughter. And so he wanted to leave something for her. So he had a peerage created for him, Baron de Neville. And he made it so that his daughter could inherit it. So she became Baroness de Neville. She married a Rice from de Neville. And that's where the Talbot Rice family come from.
Oh, right. Oh, right.
Talbot Rice are from this chap and his daughter and a Rice of de Neville. So that's how. So it was his nephew that took over this place. We won't spend too long on him. But, oh, by the way, this is the earliest image I could find of Hensol Castle. So it's 1774. And as you can see, there's no porch or anything.
No.
But there is all that, and there's no extra courtyard here.
No, exactly.
No clock tower.
Yeah.
But all of this 18th century stuff is still here.
Yeah.
This is the nephew, John Chetwynd Talbot. He eventually sold Hensol in 1789. But what's interesting about this is the portrait. Now, this is done by an Italian called Battoni, who was convinced there were only two real artists in the world. One of them was him. And what you see here is what you see again and again in portraits of the period. The man will be in contemporary clothes.
Yeah.
He's in contemporary clothes, and he has the Medici vase here to show he's a man of culture. And he has the Ludovisi Mars showing the god of war, Ares there. Joshua Reynolds painted his wife. And what I like about his wife, no matter who paints her, she has an amused expression on her face, Lady Charlotte. So this is him. And here she is.
Oh, yeah.
And she, of course, is make-believe. You see this a lot, don't you? You see ladies of the time painted as shepherdesses.
Yeah.
You see them painted in almost fancy dress. And she's here with Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. She's given a libation there with a little grin on her face.
A knowing smile.
She was also painted by Gainsborough. She has a little knowing smile. And also Gardner, a little knowing smile. So anyone who was anyone painted Charlotte Talbot, really.
Yeah.
But they sold up. They eventually sold up in 1789. And a man called Samuel Richardson, who I cannot find an image of.
Oh.
He did a lot of the agricultural improvements for the estate, did some work on the castle. He deserves more than just skipping through him, but there you go. But there was a local politician who had lands in Monmouthshire, and he wanted to become MP for Glamorgan. And the people of Glamorgan said, no, you prefer Monmouthshire, don't you? You haven't even got a house in Glamorgan. So he bought Hensol Castle purely to have a residence in the county.
Oh, right.
And that's Benjamin Hall. Not Big Ben, who was his son,
Oh, I see. Right.
This is Slender Ben.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to say he's not particularly big.
Not particularly big. His dad was a Ben as well. He was a Ben. God. So you've got his old Ben, you've got Slender Ben. His son was Big Ben. Maybe they had a pet bear called Gentle Ben. We don't know. But he marries well. He marries Charlotte Crawshay. She comes with a dowry of 40 grand.
Gosh.
And also a percentage of the Cyfarthfa Ironworks.
Yeah,
so he's married well, hasn't he? His Slender Ben.
He's done terribly well there.
He had money to buy Hensol for £45,500. But he eventually sells his ironworks share to his brother-in-law for £90,000. He does all right, doesn't he?
Gosh.
He does okay.
I mean, in today's terms, these are multiple million pound deals, aren't they, in today's terms?
Absolutely, they are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's difficult to comprehend how much money that was at this period. Phenomenal amount.
Yeah, and again, this is not his primary residence.
No.
He simply spent that much money just to have a residence in a constituency. So, as you say, we are talking enormous wealth. But he was only really there for 2 years at Hensol. When he died in 1817, it was immediately rented out to his brother-in-law. So Big Ben didn't live at Hensol Castle. And quite frankly, Slender Ben barely did either.
Oh, yeah.
So he rented it out to his brother-in-law, who later bought it. And that's another great name of the coal fields and the iron fields, which is William Crawshay II.
Oh.
He's known as the Iron King of Merthyr. He was the builder of Cyfarthfa Castle. We won't talk much about him because we'll do a special episode on Cyfarthfa.
Oh yeah, I'd like to.
He bought it for 20. He bought it from his brother-in-law, but he used money from a money lender in order to buy it, which his father was furious about. But he bought it, and he did live there, and he did do a fair bit for the place, the old Iron King. And when he did eventually decide he wanted to sell it in 1838, the then Lord Talbot put in an offer for £28,000. So the Talbots almost returned to Hensol in their womanizing glory. But Crawshay said, "Oh, give over. I've spent so much money on this. I'm not selling it for 28 grand." So in the end, he sold it to another Iron Master called Rowland Fothergill. Now, these names, Crawshay, Fothergill, when we've talked about the aristocrats of South Wales, Goth, a lot of them have been locally important.
Yeah.
But when you're talking of Crawshay and Fothergill, you're talking about people that their land is on a world scale, isn't it?
Yeah.
The ironworks, you're talking world matters here, world figures, not just provincial South Welsh figures.
Yeah. But there are also people that grew up, whose so we say earned their wealth more than anything that from the industry and the industrial development and stuff. A lot of the landed gentry that got it from agricultural estates are seeming to be sort of diminishing in importance slightly as the 19th century goes on.
Yeah, and they're making mistakes. I mean, as you quite rightly say, the aristocrats can't really understand this nouveau riche. Well, some don't. I mean, some do. Morgans of Tredegar adapt brilliantly. And others do. Lord Bute are industrialists and agriculturalists, but some don't understand. And Lord Talbot, he owned the land where Cyfarthfa Ironworks, which became the largest in the world, by the way, and he rented it out on a 99-year lease for £100 a year to the Crawshays with no royalties. So all they were getting, the Talbots, was £100 a year. And the mineral wealth could have made them unbelievable.
Yeah. They didn't know what it was worth, really, did they?
Do you think that's the industrialist outwitting the old aristocrats? I guess it must have been, mustn't it?
Well, yeah, they just didn't realise the importance of what was coming. I think they'd been established in a mindset of agricultural estates, and you got your money from the land, and they didn't realise you could also get your money from what was underneath it. And I think that's the problem. They didn't realize the extent of money that would be developed. And also in early stages of development of industrial techniques and everything as well. So at the time, it didn't. I don't think they could possibly realise it. This is why some of the, when you get into the early 19th century, a lot of aristocratic families do realise it and jump on the industrial and commercial bandwagon. But at this point, they're not aware of that yet.
No, and one Iron Master gave way to another. He had several houses, and although he grew up at his kids grew up at Hensol. So Hensol was very important. Hensol, by the way, was very important to the womanizing Lord Talbot as well. I mean, we know he had a harpist on site, and he had a harper and 2 fiddlers, we're told. And he did a lot for the castle. A lot of fiddling going on, I'm led to believe. There was a fair amount of fiddling going on at Hensol during the second Lord Talbot's reign. But I'll be looking forward to looking again at William Crawshay II Goth. In fact, you in particular will do that when we do Cyfarthfa, because there was a very juicy murder involved for you to get your teeth into when we go Merthyr Way and do Cyfarthfa Castle. So he passes it on, middle of the 19th century, to someone who does stay there a long time. It becomes a retirement home for another industrialist who had most of his land in the Aberdare Valley, although he did have land in Tredegar and Pontier as well. That's Rowland Fothergill takes over in 1838. Here's Rowland Fothergill.
Yeah, not painted by Gainsborough, I see.
And there's a reason that this does, it's maybe a little bit too flippant when I consider what he's doing. But anyway, let's go and do a quick. The reason he's got a pitchfork there is this is Hensol Castle in the 1850s. And as you can see, the wall is there.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And it's looking now as it looks today in a way, isn't it? Yeah. It's got the porch. It's wrapping around. He extends it, Fothergill. He extends it north. He adds that extra courtyard. Yeah. You've got the clock, which is that splendidly aesthetic distillery, which you loved so much. And so he has done a lot, and he's probably added these as well. Wyatt's work. He's turned it into a sort of a mini Malpas Court, Wyatt and Brandon in places. So he's living here. And again, Fothergill has come here. He never married, and it could be there was a certain lack of charm, perhaps, with Rowland Fothergill. In 1844, one day, he wanders out of the castle to meet with his superintendent of farms, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown got the job only after going through a vigorous tests, not the sort of tests that the Duke of Beaufort had to go through, obviously.
I feel like a step behind this screen. I beg your pardon.
All our superintendents of farms need to go behind the screen.
It's a tradition.
Just knock when you're ready. No, this one was, he had to go off on a course in Scotland. He had to, Fothergill needed someone that knew what they were doing. So to get the job, you had to prove that you were an expert and trustworthy. And indeed, Mr. Brown proved himself such. So therefore, maybe he had a temper, Fothergill. Because one day in 1843, I beg your pardon, he wandered out of the castle and saw Mr. Brown, surrounded by hay, just seemingly lounging around. And Fothergill didn't seem to ask many questions. He went up to him and battered him with a pitchfork.
What? What?
Some sources say a pike, others say a pitchfork.
What?
It's of blood dripping. This was serious business. By the way, at this time, Mr. Fothergill was a magistrate, so he batters his superintendent of farms. And poor Mr. Brown, in all seriousness, he had problems with his eyes, he had problems with his vision, he was extremely poorly for a long time afterwards.
Good God.
And in fact, I don't even know if it cut his life short. He was seriously wounded.
Bloody hell.
There was no blood, according to the witnesses, but he had battered him with the metal part of either the pike or the pitchfork.
Psycho.
So there's no way Fothergill could get away with this. So there was actually a court case where he was found guilty. And he had to pay £500 damages to Mr. Brown. 5 years later, Fothergill is made High Sheriff of Glamorgan.
Oh, gosh. It's appalling, isn't it?
Genuinely is, isn't it?
No wonder the Chartists were marching down the hill. That's all I can say. Good grief.
Yeah, poor Mr. I'll have to see if I can find what happened to Mr. Brown and get back to you. But poor man. I mean, he was an expert. There must have been a reason he wasn't gathering the hay in. You didn't have to bash him with a pitchfork. Anyway, Fothergill left another mark, and not just on the architecture. He left a little time capsule. Dug down deep, and they found it when they were building, when they were restoring it recently. So there it is. Message in a bottle.
Yeah.
By Rowland Fothergill. And he popped it in there, and they found it. And the current owners of the Leekes have also put a new one in. They put a new time capsule, including a bottle of gin.
Oh, that's quite cool.
The first bottle of their Hensol Castle range of gin they've put as part of the time capsule. So maybe in 200 years, someone will dig that up.
Yeah,
it's interesting what you find. I guess he just buried it.
Deposited under the boards of this corridor by Rowland Fothergill, the proprietor of the Hensol estate during the alterations and repairs of the castle, 10th of March, 1848.
Yeah, literally a message in a bottle.
Yeah.
So Fothergill was there for quite a long time. We can have a little look. I mean, like I said, that's how it looks. And there is actually a photograph from the 1850s or 60s showing it.
Oh, Rimey.
There's a lady there. I'm not sure who that is. Maybe his sister, because he didn't marry Fothergill. We've got some lovely images. And here we are of that 18th century range that we saw at the start of the podcast. When Fothergill died, he had no children, and his sister took over, Sister Mary, and she was there for about 16 years. When she died, it was time for new blood. So her sister took over at the age of 86, which was Anne. So Anne took over. So now it's a female-owned castle, Hensol Castle, in the late 19th century. And Anne allows people to use the grounds for whatever they wish. And I like to think, Goff, yes, on this podcast, we concentrate on the important issues, but also I like to think we do the odd trivial snapshots. And we've got a little trivial snapshot of a sketch-in party that turn up June 1891, and they set up at Hensol to sketch. And the man who's with them is Charles T. Whitmore, who's Her Majesty's, he's a very good astronomer, actually, but Her Majesty's Inspector of Schools for Cardiff at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And Whitmore has turned up, and they've clearly put him in charge of the tea urn, and he's become ridiculously excited by the prospect. And he won't leave the tea urn alone. And it's captured in the newspapers in a cartoon. So you have sketching at Hensol. So they turn up, and there they all are. And there's Mr. Whitmore welcoming them with cups of tea. There he is.
In the new line of business.
You can't take him away from the tea urn. He's having a whale of a time. And they're sketching away at Hensol. And of course, it's June in Wales, so it empties down. And they all go under the tree. And that final image, as they're under the tree, who is still at the tea urn? But Mr. Whitmore, it's utterly sort of trivial, but I like that.
Yeah.
With these sort of elderly sisters running Hensol Castle and welcoming people in. But it can't go on entirely. And the elderly sister, Anne, her daughter, Isabella Price, takes over. She marries a baronet called Sir Rose Lambert Price. And that image I showed you earlier on of Sir Francis Caradoc Rose Price, he was the last one, and he sold it in 1926.
Oh, right.
And he said it's because of super tax, as he called it. Can't afford to keep it, so he sold it to Glamorgan Council for £36,500. Isn't it amazing? It was sold in 1926 for less than they bought it for in the 18th century.
Oh, yeah, now that's good Lord. That's interesting. Yeah.
And it became, as it said, it became a hospital for those with mental health difficulties.
Oh, right.
Initially called the asylum, which wasn't really an asylum. It was a hospital for those with learning difficulties, really. And so that's what a lot of people who live in the area will remember Hensol Castle as in living memory. Because it was right up until the 21st century, this mental health hospital.
Oh, good Lord. Oh, interesting.
And so here we are, and it's here we are as a hospital. And here are some of the patients working outside. They had an awful lot. In fact, a lot of the buildings outside, they built more buildings outside for hospitals, which have now been restored rather grandly for the purposes of the hotel and the function center. So a lot of the buildings have been restored quite extraordinarily well. And what I did like very much was Swansea Museum. You could see this on People's Collection Wales, including interviews with patients and with those who worked there when it was the mental health hospital. Because for a long time, of course, this is how you would do it. You were institutionalized if you had learning difficulties quite often. When it switched to community care, eventually, I mean, they had an awful lot of patients. I mean, initially they had 343 patients in 1937, for instance. But by the early 20th century, when community care replaced sort of institutionalization, Hensol Hospital closed in 2003. And it was in 2004 that Gerald Leek, I believe, bought it and incorporated it into his hotel chain. But People's Collection Wales, if you Google that, you can see interviews with patients, you can see interviews with staff members, and Swansea Museum did a wonderful exhibition called Hidden, Now Heard, about Hensol Hospital. And they've got things like the visitor's book, you can see here. A nurse's uniform, a chair made by one of the patients. They had a wonderful little exhibit here where you could listen and sort of how the dormitories were set up. But it really is a different world, isn't it? When a place like this becomes a hospital. We've seen them as schools, haven't we? We've seen them as...
It's difficult when you think of them as hospitals. A lot of people didn't need medical care. That's why if they were more places where you just tucked them away from sight, bless them. That was what it seemed to be, really. They were cared for, they were looked for, but they were, as you said, institutionalized. They didn't have a life outside that building. Some people would be there, and some people who wound up in these institutions had really no need to be within these institutions whatsoever. You'd have cases of young girls who would be, sent off, considered that they were suffering from mental impairment of some sort, just because they'd had a child out of wedlock at the time, and they had absolutely no. And of course, the trouble with the institutionalized process is it essentially took away any form of independent behavior. You couldn't survive independently without outside these places, because you never had to. So you were institutionalized. That's what. So it was a hangover of a sort of Victorian system almost, in a way. I think it's a very good thing. It's gone. I think.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. There are very mixed stories of patients that stayed at Hensol Hospital. I mean, a lot of the staff that are interviewed in later years are extremely good. And of course, they did the best they possibly could. But in the 50s, mind you only get these when bad things happen, headlines in newspapers. But there are certain newspapers of people trying to escape and things like that. So certainly electroshock therapy would have been used in the very early days, which doesn't bear thinking about, does it?
No.
But yeah, so well done, Swansea Museum, for this. Hidden Now Heard is a wonderful title for that exhibition, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what they've done, some of the outbuildings, as I said, have been restored, including their old rec hall. Now, some of these new buildings are named after former owners of Hensol Castle. So there is a Fothergill house. There is a crochet house. But the old rec hall, which has been restored and now looks like this inside, is called Benjamin Hall.
That's rather good.
Had to be, really, didn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a big old thing to restore, isn't it? I mean, after it's been a hospital, I mean, you can see shades of Kevin Mabley.
Yeah.
There are bits of it that need an awful lot of work.
Yeah.
But it was restored. it's such a big place to take on. I mean, I don't know what Gerald Leek thought when he took on the job, but sort of the fortnight after he bought it, he must have thought, what on earth have I got on my hands here? In fact, it had been used as almost like a conference center of sorts, actually, the lower floor in the 90s, even when the hospital was using the buildings in the ground. And upstairs was the occupational therapy training for Wales, apparently. So it had started to move away from the hospital idea as the 20th century rolled on. But a big old place.
Oh, yeah.
But we've seen some of these rooms, haven't we?
Yeah.
So we can see them as they're restored. But upstairs, they've gone for ultra modern. So whereas downstairs, they've tried to maintain the history, upstairs, for people staying there when they're having a wedding, they've gone, well, I'll let you see what you think.
Interesting. Yeah.
You almost guess where this is by the shape of the room. Yeah, it's one of those towers at the side, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's all right. Oh, that's quite dramatic.
It is, isn't it? Also, it's used for filming and various things. Hensol Castle served in the first series of the rebooted Doctor Who as Downing Street.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh.
So Penelope Wilton there, Billy Piper and Christopher Eccleston at Hensol as Downing Street. They blew up Downing Street in Doctor Who, but not, I'm glad to say, Hensol Castle itself. That's how it looks today. All frosty.
Yeah.
And I do like the way they can light up and make it look dramatic. I'm sure there are many stories. Well, I know there are many stories we haven't had time to touch on today.
Whoa! Hey.
How about writing a murder mystery for that place, Goff? What do you reckon?
You got a head start on there, haven't you? Oh, yeah, around the 17th century.
What would you choose? Would you choose Fothergill? Would you kill him? Or would you use Talbot with the womanizing? What era would you choose?
You'd have to do Talbot with the womanizing for the murders, wouldn't you? I mean, you got so many suspects for the start and all the shenanigans and the actual real life history story to tell about it as well. That's the period to do it. That's the one to do. I was struck interested at the beginning. There seems to be almost like the remains of an avenue. I don't know whether that's a newly planted avenue or whatever. But obviously, where they seem to come down the side of the building into the turning circle now. But where those original little gate posts are, if you head back down, right down, there is a sort of avenue of trees that almost leads up to it. So I wonder if that would have been the original entrance at some point. You drove up that way. You didn't come around the side of the building and turn. You drove up. There, you can just see it.
Do I need to go out?
Yeah. If you go down, go south. There.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, the south was always the entrance, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think that must have been. I just wonder if that well, that avenue looks pretty well established, doesn't it? Where have you gone?
I've just come out a little bit. The castle's here.
Yeah, that avenue is pretty well established. So I wonder if that was the original avenue that you would have driven to the front of the house, because that's where the little original gates were.
You think you come down the avenue and you've got the little gates and you've got the wall around? Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Because it seems an odd way at the moment to come down past the side of the building, because you would want that approach to the big castellated front of the house, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we did Hensol Castle, because I didn't know an awful lot about it until I dug into it.
Well, I didn't know. I knew nothing. I knew nothing. All I knew was that I didn't know.
I suspect there's an awful lot more. There was one lady, actually, that claimed to be one of the second Lord Talbot's. Such a fascinating woman. One of the second Lord Talbot's. Hang on, let me see if I can show her for you. Just a sec. Oh, yes, I can. There she is. Now, she claimed to be an illegitimate daughter of Lord Talbot. In fact, she called herself, as you can see, Mary Ann Talbot, otherwise known in the Royal Navy as John Taylor.
Oh, footboy, drummer, sailor, etc., etc. Good Lord.
Apparently, she became John Taylor to serve as a midshipman in the Royal Navy.
Good Lord.
Which it actually was the plot for Carry On Jack. Do you remember that? Is it Juliet Mills who dressed up as a as a midshipman?
Yeah.
My favourite that was Bernard Cribbins as midshipman Poop Decker. And Kenneth Williams as Captain Fearless.
Yeah.
The problem with her is, I mean, there are books written about her in the period, contemporary books.
Yeah.
And some of the claims about her, when you examine them, don't add up. You know, she claims that she was on a certain ship in a certain battle, which never happened.
Oh,
and so you wonder how much the pudding has been over-egged in later years.
Yeah.
Or she over-egged it. But nevertheless, she got this reputation as passing herself off as a midshipman in the Royal Navy and claiming that her father was William II Lord Talbot. Let's be honest, most people's father was William II Lord Talbot in the area at the time.
Probably in the area, yes.
I thought she was quite interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think this is intriguing. A little footnote. Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. I'm not sure where we're going next, Goff. I'm waiting on... we got a gift. I didn't tell you this.
No.
We got a gift. Someone has sent us our first gift as a podcast.
Gosh.
And we're over 300 subscribers now, so thank you.
Yeah.
Do subscribe, and if you press the little bell, it'll give you a notification every time a new video is released. Yeah. So if you haven't, please do that. Now, someone sent us a gift, which I should have got ready now, but I'll get it for the next podcast. Someone has sent us a flag of Monmouthshire.
Oh, yes, good Lord.
One of only 26 counties in the United Kingdom to have its own official flag. But very excitingly, the flag is based on the old kingdom of Gwent, the dark blue and the light blue. So next time we do a Monmouthshire property, I'll make sure I have the flag flying somewhere here.
Yes, yeah. Excellent.
So thank you so much for that. I'm not sure if you want your name known, so I won't name you, but thank you so much. You didn't have to do that, but we shall fly the flag for Monmouthshire. And I think we fly the flag a little bit for Glamorgan as well. So do you have anything else to add, Goff, before we disappear?
No, it's been a joy. That's all I can say.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, we shall therefore see you again very soon. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.